Good evening, Americans, and welcome to The Ed Show from New York. Tonight, for the first time anywhere, you will meet the man who videotaped Mitt Romney's 47% comments. This is The Ed Show. Let's get to work.
How much of that gets picked up? There's so many things that don't get picked up in a campaign because people aren't watching.
Big morning in politics here.
Today there was a political earthquake in the presidential race.
Romney says President Obama's base of voters believe they are victims.
The result could be a potential game changer in the presidency.
It was the recording that ignited a media firestorm.
I understand that there's a video that's been on the internet.
The secret video that began a political collapse.
In this case, that says something that's just completely wrong.
For the first time, you'll find out all the details. What was it like in the room? What did Mitt Romney say that was so offensive? And who shot the secret video that changed the course of history?
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. The 47% video changed the course of the 2012 presidential election. The Romney campaign scrambled to address the candid comments, but the proof was on the video. Governor Romney was not concerned with the middle class in this country or the poor in America. For months, the identity of the person who shot this video has remained a mystery. Over the next hour, you will hear his story. And right now, you will find out just who he is. What is your name and what are you all about?
My name's Scott Prouty. I'm a regular guy, middle class, hardworking guy. I think I'd like to think I have a good moral compass and a core, and I think I have a little bit of empathy. I think I have a little more empathy than Mitt Romney had. I don't know how to describe myself, but I was behind this whole thing. I was bartending that night for the Romney fundraiser.
Let's talk about May 17th. What happened that day?
We got there, it was a political fundraiser. We did our usual thing. We set up, and it went off without a hitch. I work high-end parties all over just for extra money, and it was just really just another typical party that I've done plenty of them just like it. Did you know you were going to record him? I did. I had brought the camera, and a lot of other people brought cameras, like I said, for thinking that he would come back and take pictures. Clinton in the past had come back with the staff and taken pictures, and that was, really my thought. I hadn't really made up my mind. I was willing to listen to what he had to say. I was interested to hear what he had to say, and but I didn't go there with a grudge, against Romney. I was more interested as a voter.
How'd you get the camera in there?
I just carried it in my backpack. Again, they had never said don't bring cameras, don't film, don't. That was never said, and I thought, why not? So you didn't go there with the intention to get Mitt Romney on tape to make it a big story? I really had no idea he would say what he said. I thought he would say basically the same things he was saying in public. I had no idea it was going to be this big thing that it turned out to be. I had no idea. So this was done, and the way it unfolded with you was not because you were an Obama supporter. This is a justice-injustice issue with you, that there was someone running in public and saying something different behind closed doors. That's your analysis. Frankly, the people that were there that night, they paid $50,000 per person for dinner. And, I grew up in a blue-collar area, Boston, and nobody I know can afford to pay $50,000 for dinner. I just don't know anybody that can do that. And in a way, I felt like, whether you're a Republican or an independent, or there's a lot of people that can't afford to pay $50,000, for one night, for one dinner. And I felt an obligation in a way to release it. I felt an obligation for all the people that can't afford to be there. You shouldn't have to be able to afford $50,000 to hear what the candidate actually thinks. What did you personally go through? Was there any defining moment that you can remember that said, I'm going to do this, I have to do this? I'd gone back and forth in that 2-week period. I'd gone back and forth and said, I have a pretty comfortable life. I struggle like everybody else, and why am I going to do this? Why am I going to risk everything? Should I risk everything? Should I put myself in jeopardy? Should I put myself in legal jeopardy? And and there was times I kind of went back and forth a little bit, and I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and I was in the darkness of my house, just looking out the window and just thinking about it. And I walked into the bathroom and I just looked in the mirror, and the words "you coward" just came out of my mouth, and I just looked in the mirror and just said, "You're a coward. You're an absolute coward." And because I was kind of leaning not putting it out, and it just kind of came out of my mouth, and I went back to bed and said, "All right, well that's not going to work. I'm going to put it out. I'm going to be proud I did it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and I'm going to make sure as many people as possible hear it." And that's and then I at least when I turned that corner, I felt good about it. I felt like I was doing the right thing, and I went down the path and never looked back.
Let's go to the recording. This is May 17th. This is when it all started. Candidate Romney comes in the room, and you've got the camera set up. Let's play this.
And I guess everybody here is a dignitary, and I appreciate your help. And by the way, I am serious about the food. Bring in, don't slow down. So just come in, clear the places, but Hillary has to eat her beets.
What's happening here?
He'd only been in the room for maybe a minute or two, and I think it was telling for me. He'd basically just walked into a dinner party that he was the guest of honor, and he demanded that the service be sped up. He literally had just walked in the door, and I thought that was kind of remarkable. Anybody that walks into a dinner party, doesn't matter who you are, I can't imagine demanding to be fed faster, to be served faster. It wasn't like we were behind schedule. And I just think that says a lot about who he is, to walk into any person's house and to demand, speed it up, bring it.
This next clip we have is really an attention grabber. I understand it was for you. He's talking about being lucky, being born with a silver spoon, and then he transitions to talking about China, which really caught your attention. Here it is.
When I was back in my private equity days, we went to China to buy a factory there. It employed about 20,000 people, and they were almost all young women between the ages of about 18 and 22 or 23. They were saving for potentially becoming married, and they worked in these huge factories. They made various small appliances, and as we were walking through this facility, seeing them work, the number of hours they worked per day, the pittance they earned, living in dormitories, with little bathrooms at the end of maybe 10 rooms. And in the rooms, they had 12 girls per room, 3 bunk beds atop of each other. You've seen them. Yeah. And around this factory was a fence, a huge fence with barbed wire and guard towers. And we said, "Gosh, I can't believe that you keep these girls in." They said, No. This is to keep other people from coming in, because people want so badly to come work in this factory that we have to keep them out, or they'll just come in here and start working and try and get compensated. So this is to keep people out.
So at this point, you wanted to make sure you got what he was saying.
I wanted to
That wasn't your intention when you started, but as it unfolded, you now were taking some measures to protect the recording.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't, I had a Secret Service agent behind me, and, number one, we were never told that this was a secret meeting or a private meeting or don't bring cameras. There was plenty of people in the room with cameras. There was a reception area and people were taking video. There was a videographer there with a camera on a tripod. There was a microphone and a sound man, and there was 70 people in the room, and it was never said to us, don't bring cameras. But, at this point, I realized that this was not your typical speech.
So this was the clip that motivated you to go public?
100%, absolutely.
All right, let's look at the 47% comment, which you admit, and I think we all know, got the most play out of all of this.
Well, there are 47% of the people who will vote for the president no matter what. All right, there are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they're victims, who believe that government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they're entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it.
What was your response initially?
You know, I knew where he came from. He was born with all the advantages, advantages that few people have. The son of a governor, CEO, prep school educated, Harvard educated, and I don't think he has any clue what a regular American goes through on a daily basis. I don't think he has any idea what a single mom, taking a bus to work, dropping a kid off at a daycare, that she can barely afford, hopping on another bus, and the day in, day out struggles of everyday Americans. That guy has no idea, and I don't think he'll ever have an idea.
So you've got this tape, and you go home, and you know what you've got, but you really don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it was that 2-week period, and I lost sleep, and I waited, and I just thought, what am I going to, I knew it could be an absolute mess. I just knew that it could throw my life into absolute turmoil. I'd lose my job. Maybe I'd get sued. I looked into, all those issues, and
issues meaning you looked into the research of China?
I looked into the research of China. After I decided, I eventually, about 2 weeks into it, I said, you know what, this is going live. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the biggest way I possibly can. I'm going to make sure as many people hear his words and his words only. I felt an obligation that, and people could decide for themselves whether they agreed with him or not, but I felt like it was my duty to make sure that as many people heard it as possible. And so I started doing a little bit of homework. I wanted to find out what factory exactly he was talking about, and just and have a little bit of backup there. And that brought me to David Corn's July 11th article in Mother Jones, and he did an article about global tech.
So you were thinking, in the research you were doing, in the articles that you read, one specifically by David Corn and Mother Jones, correct, that this is what Romney was talking about.
I thought so. I thought so. It was a small appliance factory, large factory. There's actually pictures online. I was able to find a photo of the factory, and it was as described: huge barbed wire, guard towers, huge factory, and it all kind of lined up for me.
And that took you to what conclusion?
Well, it took me to, moving forward, James Carter was noted as a research assistant in that article.
Jimmy Carter's grandson.
Correct, yeah. I didn't know that at the time, but he, and figuring that I respected David Corn's journalism, and considering that he had done this article already about global tech, I said, this is the guy that I want to take it national. I want him to pop on this and do it. And I figured the best way to get a hold of David was through his research assistant. And that made me contact James Carter on YouTube and Twitter.
At that particular point, when they started, you didn't release the whole tape right away. What was your strategy behind that?
My goal was for, if you typed in Mitt Romney into Google, my goal was to have that clip, that China clip, pop up. The way you do that, or the way I understood you do it, is by having as many links as possible all over the place on the internet. That raises your, you're standing on Google, and so my goal was to spread that as far and wide as possible, knowing, I considered, if I'm going to do it, do I release the whole thing right now? Do I do it? It was May 31st when I put the first clip online, and I came to the conclusion, no, I think I want it to go live and full, probably when most people are paying attention. And I thought that was probably around the conventions, the RNC and the DNC.
And so the first tape went out late May, then there was another one, and you saw this build in the social network. Why didn't you just come out and do an interview?
I had offers. You know, when Dave, you know, I was spreading it, and it was all over Twitter, and it was all over Facebook, and it was all over all the social networks. And
anonymous name.
Yeah, anonymous name. I wanted to just put it out there and get the conversation started, but I degraded the video. I didn't want them to be able to pinpoint exactly where it had been taken. And, you know, I didn't want to give the Romney camp a head start in tracking me down to find me. And so I did everything I could to minimize my personal risk, but still to make sure that I got it out to the maximum number of people possible. You know, so I was putting it a link here and a link there and a link here and a link there, and then other people were picking up on it and talking about it, and they'd put it in a blog and this blog and that blog, and I thought, you know,
You just wanted the conversation.
I wanted the conversation.
You didn't want the attention to yourself.
No, I had, you know, when David went public with it and he released the full video, I had offers, you know, Today's Show and this and that and the other, and as far away as Germany. You know, and I thought it was absolutely the wrong thing to do. All along with David, I wanted Mitt Romney's words and Mitt Romney's words only. He's the guy running for president. I wanted his words to be the absolute center of attention. And you know, maybe it'd be fun to go on a show or do this show or that, but I thought that would change the topic of the conversation away from the primary thing that was most important to me. And of course, I expected to be ripped apart by the right-wing media, and I'm sure that's to come. The blowback will occur inevitably. But, you know, before the election, I thought it was just too important for me to just stand up and say, hey, I did it, and try to, you know, get a little bit of fame from it.
Up next, more with Scott Prouty, the man who changed the face of the 2012 election. Next, stick around.